Do you remember those comforting soups your grandparents used to make? The ones that filled the kitchen with warmth on cold winter evenings? Back in the 1950s, homemakers turned simple, affordable ingredients into hearty bowls of nourishment that could feed a family without breaking the budget. From creamy chowders to savory stews, each recipe carried a little love, a touch of ingenuity, and the promise of comfort at the dinner table. Today, we're bringing back 30 forgotten soups that once warmed every winter, reminding us how resourceful and delicious mid-century kitchens could be. Split pea with ham bone. There's something undeniably comforting about a steaming bowl of split pea with ham bone, a soup that defined winter kitchens in 1950s America.
Split pea soup. I have a ham bone from it.
This was a dish born from thrift and ingenuity, turning a leftover ham bone and a bag of dried split peas into a hearty, flavorful meal that could feed an entire family without straining the grocery budget. As the peas simmered slowly, they softened into a creamy base, absorbing the smoky richness of the ham and the gentle sweetness of onions and carrots, creating a depth of flavor that felt luxurious despite its humble ingredients. Preparation was simple, yet it required patience and care, a hallmark of mid-century home cooking. Onions, carrots, and celery were sautéed in a bit of fat, then combined with rinsed split peas, the ham bone, water or stock, and a pinch of salt and pepper. Hours of gentle simmering transformed these modest components into a thick, satisfying soup with tender morsels of ham scattered throughout. For families, it was not just about nourishment, but also about the comforting aroma that filled the kitchen, signaling warmth, care, and the promise of a filling meal. Split pea with ham bone carried more than flavor. It carried memories. Children would come in from school to the scent of simmering soup. Grandparents would offer tips on how to make the broth richer, and families learned to stretch every ingredient with pride. It was frugality and tradition served in a single bowl, proving that a meal didn't need to be expensive to be loved. Even today, this soup holds its place as a classic of American home cooking. Modern cooks might toss in fresh herbs or a dash of smoked paprika, but the essence remains the same. A humble, hearty, and soul-warming dish that embodies the spirit of 1950s kitchens and the timeless comfort of good, honest food. Cream of tomato soup from scratch. Few dishes from the 1950s evoke the cozy warmth of a kitchen, like cream of tomato soup from scratch. Unlike the canned versions many of us grew up with,
rich and creamy tomato soup. So let's get started.
This homemade version relied on ripe tomatoes, a splash of milk or cream, a touch of butter, and a handful of simple seasonings to create a smooth, velvety soup that felt both comforting and indulgent. It was a dish that transformed humble pantry staples into a meal that could warm the body and the heart, perfect for chilly winter evenings or a quick weeknight dinner. The preparation was straightforward yet satisfying. Fresh tomatoes were peeled and chopped, then simmered with onions, garlic, and a bit of broth until tender. A careful blend or mash turned the mixture into a creamy base, enriched with butter and finished with milk or cream to achieve that luscious texture. Salt, pepper, and a hint of sugar balanced the flavors, while a sprinkling of fresh herbs could elevate it further. Served with buttered toast, grilled cheese sandwiches, or even a simple sprinkle of grated cheese, this soup was the centerpiece of a cozy meal. Beyond its delicious simplicity, cream of tomato soup embodied the resourcefulness of 1950s homemakers. It was frugal yet satisfying, turning everyday ingredients into a dish that nourished both body and spirit. Families cherished it for its warmth, its familiar flavors, and the way it could bring everyone together around the table. Today, making cream of tomato soup from scratch offers more than a taste of nostalgia. Modern cooks might experiment with roasting the tomatoes first or adding a dash of smoked paprika, but the essence remains the same. A comforting, timeless soup that proves simple ingredients, patience, and care can create a dish that feels like a hug in a bowl. Vegetable beef soup. Nothing says home like a steaming bowl of vegetable beef soup, a classic 1950s dish that turned simple, affordable ingredients into a hearty, satisfying meal. This was the kind of soup that could feed a family without stretching the grocery budget, relying on inexpensive cuts of beef, seasonal or canned vegetables, and a few pantry staples to create a rich, flavorful broth. As it simmered on the stove, the aromas of tender beef, onions, carrots, and celery filled the kitchen, signaling warmth, comfort, and the promise of a filling dinner. The preparation was practical and forgiving.
Beef and vegetable soup is on the menu today, packed with tender beef.
Chunks of beef were browned to develop flavor, then simmered with onions, garlic, and a medley of vegetables, often including potatoes, green beans, and tomatoes. A splash of water or stock turned the ingredients into a rich, savory broth, while herbs like parsley, thyme, or bay leaves added subtle layers of aroma. Left to cook slowly, the flavors melded together, and the beef became tender enough to melt in the mouth, while the vegetables absorbed the savory richness of the broth. Vegetable beef soup was more than just a meal. It was a reflection of 1950s household ingenuity. Families learned to make the most of what they had. Leftover bones could flavor the broth, and a variety of vegetables ensured the dish was both nutritious and filling. Children would watch eagerly as bowls were ladled, enjoying the combination of tender meat and soft, flavorful vegetables, while parents appreciated a meal that required minimal fuss, yet delivered maximum satisfaction. Even today, vegetable beef soup remains a comforting classic. Modern cooks may tweak it with fresh herbs, slow cookers, or specialty vegetables, but the heart of the dish remains unchanged. A humble, nourishing, and timeless soup that embodies the warmth, resourcefulness, and homey charm of 1950s kitchens. Chicken and rice soup. Few dishes capture the comforting simplicity of 1950s home cooking like chicken and rice soup. It was the kind of meal that could stretch a modest budget while still feeling nourishing and satisfying, transforming leftover or inexpensive chicken into a warming, flavorful broth brimming with tender meat, soft rice, and humble vegetables. The aroma of simmering chicken and herbs would fill the kitchen, promising a bowl of comfort that could chase away the winter chill and bring the family together around the table. Preparation was straightforward but required a gentle hand and a bit of patience.
This chicken and rice soup.
Chicken, often a whole bird or leftover pieces, was simmered slowly with onions, carrots, and celery to create a rich, savory stock. Rice was added toward the end, soaking up the flavors of the broth and becoming tender without turning mushy. Simple seasonings, salt, pepper, and perhaps a dash of parsley or thyme, elevated the soup, while small variations like adding peas or a squeeze of lemon allowed families to adapt the dish to what they had on hand. Chicken and rice soup was more than nourishment. It was tradition and ingenuity in a bowl. Housewives of the era prided themselves on turning modest ingredients into satisfying meals, while children eagerly anticipated the tender morsels of chicken and the comforting warmth of the broth. The soup's simplicity also made it forgiving, allowing cooks to adjust quantities and ingredients based on the day's supplies or family size. Even today, chicken and rice soup remains a beloved classic. Modern cooks may swap white rice for brown or add fresh herbs and spices, but the heart of the dish, a simple, nourishing, and cozy soup that embodies care, thrift, and homey warmth, endures. It's a testament to the timeless charm of 1950s kitchens and the comforting power of a well-made bowl of soup. Lentil soup with carrots. There's a quiet, humble magic in a bowl of lentil soup with carrots, a staple of 1950s kitchens where frugality met flavor. Lentils, inexpensive and packed with protein, formed the heart of this soup, while carrots and onions added sweetness, texture, and color. As the ingredients simmered together, the kitchen filled with a warm, earthy aroma, a promise of nourishment and comfort that could feed a family on even the tightest budget. It was the kind of dish that proved hearty meals didn't require expensive cuts of meat or elaborate ingredients, just patience, care, and a little culinary ingenuity. The preparation was simple but satisfying. Lentils were rinsed and combined with chopped carrots, onions, and occasionally celery, then simmered in water or a light broth until tender. Salt, pepper, and perhaps a pinch of herbs like thyme or bay leaf rounded out the flavors, while a splash of vinegar or a squeeze of lemon at the end could brighten the soup and lift its richness. Left to cook slowly on the stove, the lentils softened into a creamy, hearty texture, mingling with the sweetness of the carrots to create a soup both simple and deeply satisfying. Lentil soup with carrots was more than just a frugal meal. It was a reflection of resourcefulness and comfort. Families cherished it for its warmth, sustenance, and the way it stretched inexpensive ingredients into a dish everyone could enjoy. Children might have grumbled at first glance, but the rich, savory flavor often won them over, while parents appreciated a soup that required little effort yet delivered full satisfaction. Today, this classic remains a testament to timeless home cooking. Modern cooks may add spices, fresh herbs, or a dash of cream, but the essence endures. A humble, nourishing, and heartwarming soup that celebrates thrift, tradition, and the comforting flavors of 1950s kitchens. Potato and leek soup. Potato and leek soup was a wintertime staple in the 1950s kitchens, a dish that transformed humble ingredients into a creamy, comforting bowl of warmth.
Potato leek soup is a comfort food classic and one to cozy up.
Potatoes provided heartiness and substance, while leeks added a subtle sweetness and oniony depth that elevated the simplest of meals. As the soup simmered on the stove, the gentle aroma of cooked leeks and tender potatoes filled the kitchen, signaling not only nourishment, but the care and love poured into home-cooked meals. It was the kind of dish that could feed a family affordably while feeling indulgent, a perfect example of mid-century resourcefulness. The preparation was straightforward, yet required attention to texture and flavor. Potatoes were peeled and chopped, leeks cleaned and sliced. Then both were simmered in water or light stock until soft. Some cooks added a splash of milk or cream to achieve a velvety consistency, while others preferred the lighter, broth-based version that let the vegetables shine. Seasonings were simple: salt, pepper, and perhaps a hint of fresh or dried herbs like thyme or parsley. Once blended or mashed to the desired texture, the soup was ladled into bowls, often garnished with a pat of butter or a sprinkle of chopped herbs for a touch of elegance. Beyond its taste, potato and leek soup was emblematic of the ingenuity of 1950s homemakers who turned inexpensive staples into satisfying, wholesome meals. It was nourishing in both body and spirit, a dish that welcomed family members home from school or work with warmth and comfort. Today, the soup remains a beloved classic, reminding modern cooks that simplicity, patience, and a few quality ingredients can create a timeless, heartwarming dish that embodies the cozy charm of mid-century kitchens. Navy bean soup with smoked meat. Navy bean soup with smoked meat was a quintessential winter staple in 1950s American homes, offering warmth, heartiness, and thrift all in one pot. Navy beans, inexpensive and protein-rich, formed the base of the soup, while smoked meats, often ham hocks or leftover bacon, added a deep, savory flavor that transformed simple legumes into a meal the whole family could enjoy. As the soup simmered gently on the stove, the smoky aroma mingled with onions, carrots, and celery, filling the kitchen with a sense of comfort and care. The kind of fragrance that made children rush home from school eager for a bowl. The preparation was straightforward, relying on time and patience rather than complexity. Beans were soaked overnight to soften, then cooked slowly with chopped vegetables, a ham hock or smoked meat, water or broth, and a few simple seasonings. Hours of gentle simmering allowed the beans to absorb the smoky richness of the meat, producing a thick, creamy consistency without the need for added thickeners. Salt, pepper, and a bay leaf completed the flavor, though some cooks added a dash of vinegar at the end to brighten the earthy tones. This soup was more than sustenance. It was a reflection of 1950s resourcefulness and family-centered cooking. Leftover smoked meat found new life, and simple ingredients stretched to feed large families on modest budgets. It carried warmth not only in flavor but in tradition, a dish ladled into bowls around the table, enjoyed with crusty bread, and remembered fondly for the comforting ritual of sharing a homemade meal. Even today, navy bean soup with smoked meat endures as a timeless classic. Modern variations might swap in fresh herbs or use slow cookers for convenience, yet the heart of the dish remains the same. Humble, nourishing, and deeply satisfying. A true testament to the ingenuity and warmth of 1950s kitchens. Barley and mushroom soup. Barley and mushroom soup was a quietly elegant staple of 1950s kitchens, a dish that transformed modest ingredients into a deeply satisfying and nourishing winter meal. Pearly barley lent a gentle chew and heartiness, while earthy mushrooms contributed a rich, savory depth that elevated the soup without the need for expensive cuts of meat. As it simmered on the stove, the aroma of sautéed mushrooms mingling with onions and herbs would fill the kitchen, promising warmth, comfort, and the satisfaction of a homemade meal crafted with care. Preparation was simple yet deliberate. Mushrooms were sliced and sautéed with onions and garlic to release their natural flavors before being added to simmering barley and vegetable stock. Carrots, celery, or other seasonal vegetables often joined the mix, enhancing both texture and nutritional value. A slow simmer allowed the barley to plump and the flavors to meld into a hearty, creamy consistency. Seasonings were modest: salt, pepper, and perhaps a sprig of thyme or a bay leaf, letting the natural flavors shine. Some cooks would finish the soup with a pat of butter or a splash of cream, adding richness without masking the wholesome ingredients. This soup reflected the ingenuity and frugality of 1950s homemakers, turning pantry staples into a meal that was both satisfying and comforting.
A super healthy, easy, whole food plant-based mushroom barley soup.
Families appreciated its warmth on cold evenings, the way a single pot could stretch to feed many, and the simple joy of sharing a wholesome dish around the table. Today, barley and mushroom soup remains a testament to timeless home cooking. Modern cooks may experiment with different mushroom varieties or add fresh herbs, but its heart endures. A humble, nourishing, and cozy soup that embodies the resourcefulness and comforting charm of mid-century American kitchens. Cabbage soup.
This delicious and easy cabbage soup.
Cabbage soup was a humble yet hearty staple in 1950s kitchens, a dish that exemplified frugality and family-centered home cooking. Cabbage, inexpensive and widely available, formed the base while onions, carrots, and sometimes potatoes added flavor, color, and substance. Simmered slowly on the stove, the soup filled the kitchen with a warm, earthy aroma, signaling a nourishing meal that could stretch to feed an entire family without breaking the grocery budget. It was simple, unpretentious, and deeply comforting, perfect for cold evenings or a quick, satisfying weeknight dinner. The preparation was straightforward and forgiving. Cabbage was chopped and combined with sautéed onions, carrots, and any additional vegetables on hand, then simmered in water or light broth until tender. Seasonings were minimal: salt, pepper, and perhaps a bay leaf or a touch of thyme, allowing the natural flavors of the vegetables to shine. Some cooks added a splash of tomato juice or a hint of vinegar to brighten the soup, creating a slightly tangy undertone that balanced the richness of the vegetables. Cabbage soup was more than a frugal meal. It represented the ingenuity of 1950s homemakers who could transform simple ingredients into something nourishing, flavorful, and filling. Families gathered around the table, enjoying the warmth and heartiness of a dish that reminded them of home and tradition. It was affordable, adaptable, and endlessly satisfying. A soup that carried both sustenance and a sense of comfort in every spoonful. Today, cabbage soup remains a classic example of timeless home cooking. Modern cooks might add herbs, smoked sausage, or a touch of spice, but the essence stays the same. A humble, wholesome, and heartwarming soup that celebrates the resourcefulness, practicality, and comforting charm of mid-century American kitchens. Corn chowder.
This recipe for Grandma's corn chowder is the perfect meal on a cold, blustery day.
Corn chowder was a beloved comfort food in 1950s kitchens, offering creamy, satisfying warmth without requiring costly ingredients. Sweet corn, often fresh in summer or canned in winter, formed the heart of the soup, complemented by onions, potatoes, and a splash of milk or cream to create a rich, velvety base. As it simmered on the stove, the kitchen filled with a gentle sweetness and savory aroma, signaling a meal that was both hearty and comforting, perfect for cold evenings or a simple weeknight supper. Preparation was straightforward, yet rewarding. Onions and diced potatoes were sautéed or simmered in butter, then combined with corn in liquid, water, broth, or milk, allowing the flavors to meld slowly. A touch of salt, pepper, and perhaps a pinch of thyme or paprika rounded out the taste, while careful simmering ensured the potatoes softened and the corn released its natural sweetness. Some cooks would finish the chowder with a bit of cream or a dollop of butter for extra richness, creating a smooth, comforting texture that could be ladled into bowls and enjoyed with crusty bread or crackers. Beyond its flavor, corn chowder reflected the ingenuity and practicality of 1950s homemakers. It made the most of what was on hand, turning inexpensive staples into a dish that nourished both body and spirit. Families cherished it for its warmth, its familiar taste, and the way it could stretch to feed multiple people with minimal effort. Today, corn chowder remains a timeless classic. Modern cooks may experiment with fresh herbs, roasted corn, or smoked bacon, but its essence endures. A simple, hearty, and soul-warming soup that embodies the comfort, resourcefulness, and nostalgic charm of mid-century American kitchens. Chicken noodle soup. Few dishes evoke the warmth and comfort of 1950s kitchens like chicken noodle soup. This humble soup turned simple, affordable ingredients, chicken, noodles, and a handful of vegetables, into a hearty, nourishing meal that could feed a family without straining the budget. As it simmered on the stove, the aroma of tender chicken, sautéed onions, carrots, and celery mingled with the savory broth, creating a sense of home and care that made every bowl feel like a hug. It was the kind of dish that could soothe a cold, fill hungry bellies, and bring everyone together around the dinner table. Preparation was straightforward but required patience and attention. Chicken, often a whole bird or leftover pieces, was simmered slowly to create a flavorful stock. Meanwhile, vegetables were chopped and added to infuse the broth with sweetness and depth. Noodles were cooked directly in the simmering soup toward the end, absorbing the rich flavors and providing a comforting texture. Simple seasonings, salt, pepper, and a sprinkle of fresh parsley or thyme enhanced the flavors without overpowering the natural taste of the ingredients. Chicken noodle soup was more than sustenance. It reflected the resourcefulness of 1950s homemakers who could turn modest pantry staples into a satisfying, wholesome meal. Families appreciated its warmth and heartiness, while cooks loved its flexibility, easily adapting it with what was on hand, whether extra vegetables, herbs, or leftover chicken. Today, chicken noodle soup remains a timeless classic. Modern cooks may swap in whole grain noodles or add fresh herbs for a twist, but the essence endures. A simple, nourishing, and heartwarming soup that embodies the comforting, practical charm of mid-century American kitchens and the love poured into every homemade bowl. Mock turtle soup. Mock turtle soup was a curious yet cherished dish in the 1950s kitchens, a creative way for homemakers to bring elegance to the table without the cost of real turtle meat. Using inexpensive beef or veal, often combined with rich stock, herbs, and vegetables, the soup aimed to replicate the luxurious flavor of traditional turtle soup. As it simmered, the kitchen filled with a savory aroma of slow-cooked meat, onions, carrots, and subtle seasonings, a promise of a warming and hearty meal that felt special despite its humble origins. It was the kind of dish that turned frugality into ingenuity, showcasing how mid-century cooks could elevate simple ingredients into something memorable. Preparation required a thoughtful balance of flavors. Chopped or ground beef was simmered gently with onions, carrots, celery, and occasionally mushrooms, creating a deep, flavorful stock. Thickening agents such as flour or breadcrumbs were often added to achieve the velvety texture reminiscent of traditional turtle soup. Seasonings like thyme, bay leaf, and a touch of mace or nutmeg enhanced the complexity, while a dash of lemon or Worcestershire sauce brightened the richness. The result was a soup that was both hearty and nuanced, perfect for cold evenings or special family dinners. Beyond its flavor, mock turtle soup reflected the resourcefulness and creativity of 1950s homemakers. Leftover cuts of meat and pantry staples were transformed into a dish that felt celebratory, embodying thrift without sacrificing taste. Families appreciated the warming, comforting nature of the soup, while cooks took pride in their ability to craft a sophisticated meal on a budget. Today, mock turtle soup remains a fascinating piece of culinary history. While modern palates may adapt it with fresh herbs or simplified techniques, its essence endures. A hearty, flavorful, and imaginative soup that speaks to the ingenuity and charm of mid-century American kitchens. Minestrone, American 1950s style. Minestrone in the 1950s American kitchens was a colorful, hearty soup that made the most of inexpensive vegetables, pasta, and beans, transforming pantry staples into a nourishing family meal. Unlike its Italian ancestor, the mid-century version leaned on convenience, often incorporating canned tomatoes, frozen or canned vegetables, and elbow macaroni, creating a thick, comforting broth that stretched to feed hungry families. As the soup simmered on the stove, the scent of tomatoes, onions, and herbs filled the air, promising warmth and sustenance with every ladle. It was a dish that celebrated frugality, creativity, and the ability to turn simple ingredients into a meal that felt wholesome and satisfying. Preparation was straightforward but relied on layering flavors. Onions, carrots, and celery were sautéed to release their sweetness before being combined with canned tomatoes, stock, and beans. Pasta or rice was added toward the end, softening in the flavorful liquid, while seasonings like salt, pepper, and dried herbs, often oregano or basil, rounded out the taste. Leftover vegetables could be tossed in without hesitation, making the soup endlessly adaptable to what was on hand. A sprinkle of grated cheese on top, if available, added a touch of indulgence to the otherwise economical dish. Minestrone was more than just a budget-friendly meal. It represented the ingenuity of 1950s homemakers who could turn modest ingredients into something nourishing, filling, and comforting. Children and adults alike enjoyed the hearty combination of beans, pasta, and vegetables, while cooks appreciated its flexibility and simplicity. Today, minestrone remains a beloved classic. Modern variations may include fresh herbs, seasonal produce, or whole grain pasta, but the essence endures. A wholesome, adaptable, and heartwarming soup that embodies the practicality, resourcefulness, and comforting charm of mid-century American kitchens. Ham and bean soup. Ham and bean soup was a quintessential 1950s comfort food, offering hearty flavor and satisfying warmth while stretching modest ingredients to feed an entire family. Dried beans, inexpensive and protein-rich, formed the foundation, while leftover ham or a ham hock infused the soup with deep, smoky savoriness that made it feel substantial without being costly. As it simmered on the stove, the rich aroma of beans, onions, carrots, and celery mingled with the ham, filling the kitchen with a promise of nourishment, warmth, and home-cooked care. It was a dish that exemplified both thrift and comfort, perfect for a cold evening or a simple weeknight supper. Preparation was straightforward yet required patience. The beans were soaked overnight and then simmered slowly with diced ham, chopped onions, carrots, and celery until tender and flavorful. A few simple seasonings, salt, pepper, bay leaf, and perhaps a touch of thyme, enhanced the natural flavors without overpowering them. Some cooks mashed a portion of the beans to thicken the soup, creating a creamy consistency that complemented the smoky ham. Leftover bits of ham could easily be added, turning scraps into a delicious, satisfying meal. Ham and bean soup was more than sustenance. It reflected the ingenuity of 1950s homemakers who could transform pantry staples and leftover meat into a hearty, nourishing meal. Families appreciated the combination of warmth, flavor, and simplicity, while cooks enjoyed the flexibility and practicality of a recipe that required minimal effort but delivered maximum satisfaction. Today, ham and bean soup remains a timeless classic. Modern cooks may enhance it with fresh herbs, smoked paprika, or a dash of vinegar to brighten the flavors, but its essence endures. A humble, hearty, and comforting soup that embodies the resourcefulness, warmth, and enduring charm of mid-century American kitchens. Creamed asparagus soup. Creamed asparagus soup was a springtime favorite in the 1950s kitchens, a dish that transformed simple, seasonal vegetables into a silky, comforting meal. Fresh or canned asparagus provided a subtle, earthy flavor that paired beautifully with a creamy base made from milk or a roux, creating a soup that felt elegant yet affordable. As it simmered on the stove, the delicate aroma of cooked asparagus mingled with onions or leeks, signaling a warming, nourishing dish that could serve both as a starter or a light main course. It was a soup that celebrated simplicity and the home cook's skill in turning modest ingredients into something refined and satisfying. The preparation was straightforward but required attention to texture and balance. Asparagus was trimmed, chopped, and lightly cooked with onions or leeks before being combined with a creamy stock. A roux or a splash of milk and butter added richness, while seasonings such as salt, pepper, and a hint of nutmeg enhanced the subtle flavor without overwhelming it. Some cooks would puree the soup for a smooth, velvety texture, while others preferred leaving small pieces of asparagus for bite and texture, making the soup both elegant and approachable. Beyond its taste, creamed asparagus soup reflected the ingenuity of 1950s homemakers, who could elevate inexpensive, seasonal vegetables into a dish that felt special and nourishing. Families enjoyed it for its delicate flavor, comforting warmth, and the subtle sophistication it brought to the dinner table. Today, creamed asparagus soup remains a classic example of mid-century home cooking. Modern cooks may garnish it with fresh herbs, a drizzle of cream, or a sprinkle of cheese, but its essence remains the same. A simple, creamy, and comforting soup that embodies the charm, resourcefulness, and understated elegance of 1950s American kitchens. Broccoli cheese soup. Broccoli cheese soup was a cozy, budget-friendly favorite in 1950s kitchens, transforming simple vegetables and pantry staples into a creamy, satisfying meal. Fresh or frozen broccoli formed the hearty base, while shredded cheddar, or whatever cheese was on hand, melted into a smooth, flavorful broth that made every spoonful comforting and indulgent without being expensive. As the soup simmered, the aroma of cooked broccoli mingled with onions, butter, and cheese, filling the kitchen with warmth and the promise of a family-friendly dish everyone would enjoy. It was a soup that combined practicality with indulgence, offering nourishment and flavor in equal measure. Preparation was simple and straightforward. Broccoli was chopped and cooked with onions and a touch of butter before being simmered in milk or stock. Cheese was added gradually, melting into the soup to create a creamy texture that bound the ingredients together. Seasonings like salt, pepper, and a hint of nutmeg enhanced the flavor, while leftover bread or croutons on the side made the meal even heartier. Some cooks pureed the soup for smoothness, while others left chunks of broccoli for texture and visual appeal, allowing flexibility depending on taste or occasion. Broccoli cheese. Soup reflected the ingenuity of 1950s homemakers who could elevate inexpensive vegetables into a dish that felt comforting, wholesome, and a little special. Families loved its creamy richness and the way it stretched to feed multiple mouths with minimal effort. Today, broccoli cheese soup remains a timeless classic. Modern variations may include sharper cheeses, added spices, or blended textures, but at its core, it endures as a simple, hearty, and heartwarming dish that embodies the resourcefulness, charm, and comforting flavor of mid-century American kitchens. Oxtail or beef bone broth soup. Oxtail or beef bone broth soup was a staple in 1950s American kitchens, prized for its rich, savory flavor and nourishing qualities despite modest cost. Using inexpensive cuts like oxtail or beef bones, homemakers could simmer a pot for hours, extracting every bit of flavor and nutrients to create a deeply satisfying broth. As the soup cooked, the kitchen filled with a mouth-watering aroma of slowly roasted meat. Aromatic vegetables and herbs promising warmth, comfort, and a meal that could stretch to feed the whole family. It was a dish that showcased patience and ingenuity, turning humble ingredients into a luxurious-tasting soup that spoke of home and care. Preparation was simple in concept, but demanded time. Bones or oxtails were simmered in water with onions, carrots, celery, and a few bay leaves or thyme, allowing flavors to slowly meld. Occasionally, a splash of vinegar or wine was added to help extract nutrients and deepen the broth's richness. Once the stock reached a deep, flavorful consistency, the meat could be picked from the bones and returned to the soup, adding heartiness, while some cooks added barley, rice, or small pasta for additional substance. Seasonings were kept minimal: salt, pepper, and a touch of herbs, letting the natural flavors shine. This soup reflected the resourcefulness and patience of 1950s homemakers, who could create something both nutritious and indulgent from inexpensive ingredients. Families valued it for its restorative warmth, satisfying flavor, and the sense of tradition and care it carried in every bowl. Today, oxtail or beef bone broth soup remains a testament to classic home cooking. Modern cooks may enhance it with fresh herbs, roasted vegetables, or a splash of sherry, but its essence endures: a hearty, flavorful, and nourishing soup that embodies the practicality, comfort, and timeless charm of mid-century American kitchens. Tomato rice soup. Tomato rice soup was a comforting and economical staple in 1950s American kitchens, transforming pantry staples into a warming, satisfying meal. Simple ingredients like canned tomatoes, rice, onions, and a bit of butter or oil came together to create a broth that was both tangy and hearty, perfect for feeding a family without straining the grocery budget. As it simmered, the aroma of tomatoes mingled with onions and herbs, filling the kitchen with a sense of home and simplicity that made every spoonful feel nourishing and wholesome. It was a dish that exemplified the resourcefulness and practicality of mid-century home cooking, showing how inexpensive ingredients could produce satisfying flavor. Preparation was straightforward yet flexible. Onions were sautéed until tender, then combined with canned tomatoes, water or stock, and a pinch of salt and pepper. Rice was added to the simmering mixture, absorbing the tangy broth and thickening the soup slightly for a comforting texture. Some cooks enhanced the flavor with a touch of sugar to balance the acidity of the tomatoes, while others added a few sprigs of herbs or a dash of Worcestershire sauce to deepen the taste. Leftover vegetables or bits of meat could easily be incorporated, making the soup adaptable to whatever was available in the pantry. Tomato rice soup reflected the ingenuity of 1950s homemakers who could turn simple, affordable ingredients into a meal that was both filling and flavorful. Families cherished it for its warmth and heartiness, while cooks appreciated the ease and versatility of the recipe. Today, tomato rice soup remains a classic example of mid-century comfort food. Modern versions may include fresh herbs, roasted tomatoes, or a touch of cream, but its essence endures. A simple, hearty, and heartwarming soup that embodies the practicality, charm, and comforting flavors of 1950s American kitchens. Pea and bacon soup. Pea and bacon soup was a beloved staple in the 1950s American kitchens, combining humble ingredients into a hearty, flavorful, and nourishing meal. Dried or split peas provided a creamy, protein-rich base, while small pieces of bacon lent smoky depth and richness, transforming a simple soup into a family favorite comfort dish. As it simmered on the stove, the scent of sautéed onions, celery, and bacon mingled with the earthy aroma of peas, filling the kitchen with warmth and signaling a meal that was both practical and satisfying. It was a dish that perfectly illustrated the ingenuity of mid-century homemakers who could turn inexpensive pantry staples into something memorable and delicious. Preparation was straightforward but required patience. Split peas were rinsed and then simmered slowly with chopped onions, carrots, and celery until tender and creamy. Bacon was either cooked beforehand or added during the simmering process, infusing the soup with smoky flavor and a hint of saltiness. Simple seasonings, salt, pepper, and perhaps a bay leaf or a pinch of thyme, enhanced the natural flavors without overwhelming the dish. Some cooks mashed a portion of the peas to thicken the soup, creating a creamy texture, while others left them whole for a more rustic feel. Beyond its taste, pea and bacon soup reflected the resourcefulness and care of 1950s homemakers, turning modest ingredients into a satisfying and wholesome meal that could stretch to feed multiple people. Families appreciated its warmth, heartiness, and the comforting familiarity it brought to the dinner table. Today, pea and bacon soup remains a classic example of mid-century American comfort food. Modern versions may include fresh herbs, smoked paprika, or a dash of cream, but its essence endures. A simple, hearty, and heartwarming soup that embodies the charm, practicality, and flavorful ingenuity of 1950s home cooking. Creamed cauliflower soup. Creamed cauliflower soup was a comforting and elegant yet affordable dish that graced many 1950s American tables, transforming a simple vegetable into a creamy, satisfying meal. Fresh or frozen cauliflower provided a delicate, slightly nutty flavor that blended beautifully with a rich milk or cream-based broth, creating a soup that was both hearty and refined. As it simmered, the kitchen filled with the gentle aroma of cauliflower, onions, and butter, promising warmth and nourishment in every bowl. It was a dish that showcased the creativity and practicality of mid-century homemakers who could turn inexpensive ingredients into meals that felt special. Preparation was straightforward but required attention to texture and flavor. Cauliflower florets were cooked until tender, often with onions or leek sautéed in butter to add sweetness and depth. A simple roux or a touch of cream was incorporated to achieve a smooth, velvety consistency, while seasonings such as salt, pepper, and a hint of nutmeg highlighted the subtle flavors of the vegetable. Some cooks chose to puree the soup for a silky texture, while others left small chunks for a more rustic, hearty feel. Additional touches like a sprinkle of grated cheese or fresh herbs elevated the dish without adding much cost. Creamed cauliflower soup reflected the ingenuity of 1950s homemakers who could turn a humble vegetable into a comforting, nourishing meal that could be served as a starter or a light main course. Families appreciated its gentle flavor, creamy texture, and satisfying warmth, while cooks valued its simplicity and adaptability. Today, creamed cauliflower soup endures as a classic example of mid-century American home cooking. Modern adaptations may include roasted cauliflower, fresh herbs, or alternative dairy options, but its essence remains the same. A simple, creamy, and heartwarming soup that embodies the charm, resourcefulness, and comforting flavors of 1950s kitchens. Chicken gumbo, Southern adaptation. Chicken gumbo in 1950s American kitchens, particularly in Southern homes, was a soulful, hearty dish that transformed humble ingredients into a deeply flavorful, comforting meal. Using chicken, inexpensive vegetables, and pantry staples like rice and roux, homemakers could create a dish that was both satisfying and celebratory, perfect for feeding a family on a budget. As it simmered, the kitchen filled with the rich aroma of browned chicken, onions, bell peppers, celery, and a blend of aromatic spices, promising warmth, heartiness, and a touch of Southern charm in every spoonful. It was a dish that embodied the resourcefulness, creativity, and culinary pride of mid-century cooks, taking simple elements and elevating them into something special. Preparation was methodical but forgiving. Chicken pieces were browned to develop flavor, then simmered with a darkened roux, the holy trinity of onions, bell peppers, and celery, and an assortment of seasonings: paprika, thyme, bay leaf, and cayenne pepper for a subtle kick. Vegetables and sometimes okra were added to thicken the stew naturally, while rice was served on the side or directly in the gumbo to stretch the meal. The slow simmer allowed flavors to meld, creating a rich, aromatic broth that balanced savory, spicy, and earthy notes. Chicken gumbo reflected more than just frugality. It showcased the ingenuity of 1950s Southern homemakers who could take limited ingredients and craft a dish that felt abundant, comforting, and full of character. Families treasured the warmth, depth of flavor, and the sense of tradition it brought to the table. Today, chicken gumbo continues to be a beloved classic. While modern versions may incorporate fresh herbs, smoked sausage, or contemporary twists, its essence endures. A hearty, flavorful, and soulful dish that celebrates the resourcefulness, warmth, and culinary heritage of 1950s Southern kitchens. Cream of celery soup. Cream of celery soup was a classic 1950s American favorite, offering a simple yet creamy comfort that could easily transform humble ingredients into a warming family meal. Celery, often paired with onions and butter, formed a fragrant base that, when combined with milk or a light roux, became a velvety, flavorful soup. As it simmered on the stove, the gentle aroma of sautéed vegetables filled the kitchen, signaling a dish that was both nourishing and budget-friendly, perfect for a busy weeknight or as a starter for a larger meal. It was a soup that showcased the resourcefulness of mid-century homemakers, proving that simplicity could still deliver elegance and comfort. Preparation was straightforward. Chopped celery and onions were sautéed until tender, then simmered with stock or water, thickened with a roux or a touch of cream. Seasonings like salt, pepper, and a hint of nutmeg enhanced the subtle vegetal flavor, while careful attention to cooking time ensured the celery remained aromatic without becoming bitter. Some cooks pureed the mixture for a smooth, luxurious texture, while others left small pieces for added body and bite. Leftover vegetables or herbs could easily be incorporated, demonstrating the flexibility and practicality of this mid-century recipe. Cream of celery soup reflected more than just frugality. It represented the ingenuity and care of 1950s homemakers who could turn modest, inexpensive ingredients into a comforting, versatile dish. Families appreciated its warmth, gentle flavor, and creamy consistency, making it a reliable favorite across households. Today, cream of celery soup endures as a testament to classic home cooking. Modern cooks may enhance it with fresh herbs, a dash of cream, or crispy croutons, but its essence remains the same: a simple, creamy, and heartwarming soup that embodies the charm, practicality, and comforting flavors of 1950s kitchens. Split lentil and tomato soup. Split lentil and tomato soup was a quintessential 1950s kitchen staple, marrying the hearty texture of lentils with the bright, tangy flavor of tomatoes to create a comforting, budget-friendly meal. Dried lentils, inexpensive and protein-rich, formed a creamy base when simmered slowly, while canned or fresh tomatoes added acidity and depth, balancing the earthy flavors. As it cooked, the kitchen filled with the rich aroma of onions, carrots, celery, and garlic, mingling with the warmth of lentils and tomatoes, signaling a meal that was nourishing, simple, and satisfying for the whole family. It was a dish that exemplified the ingenuity and frugality of mid-century homemakers, transforming pantry staples into a flavorful, heartwarming soup. Preparation was straightforward but required patience. Lentils were rinsed and simmered with sautéed onions, carrots, and celery until tender, while tomatoes were added to create a slightly thickened, richly flavored broth. Seasonings like salt, pepper, thyme, and bay leaf enhanced the soup without overpowering its natural flavors. Some cooks mashed a portion of the lentils to achieve a creamier texture, while others left them whole for a rustic feel. Leftover vegetables or bits of meat could be added, making the recipe flexible and practical for feeding a family on a budget. Split lentil and tomato soup was more than just sustenance. It reflected the resourcefulness and care of 1950s homemakers who could turn modest, inexpensive ingredients into a meal that felt hearty, nourishing, and wholesome. Families cherished its comforting warmth, satisfying texture, and the way it stretched to feed multiple mouths with minimal effort. Today, split lentil and tomato soup remains a classic example of mid-century home cooking. Modern cooks may enhance it with fresh herbs, a drizzle of olive oil, or a touch of cream, but its essence endures. A simple, hearty, and flavorful soup that embodies the charm, practicality, and comfort of 1950s American kitchens. Fish chowder. Fish chowder was a comforting and hearty favorite in the 1950s American homes, turning inexpensive or leftover fish into a warming, flavorful meal that could feed the whole family. Flaky white fish, often cod or haddock, combined with potatoes, onions, and a touch of milk or cream to create a rich, savory broth that was both satisfying and nourishing. As the chowder simmered, the kitchen filled with a delicate, briny aroma, mingling with the sweetness of onions and the earthiness of potatoes, signaling a dish that was simple yet indulgent. It was a recipe that exemplified mid-century ingenuity, taking humble ingredients and turning them into a meal that felt both comforting and special. Preparation was approachable but required gentle attention. Fish was simmered carefully to avoid overcooking, while potatoes and onions cooked slowly until tender, releasing their natural flavors into the broth. Milk or cream was added gradually to create a smooth, velvety consistency, while seasonings such as salt, pepper, and a dash of paprika enhanced the chowder's depth without overwhelming it. Some cooks added a sprinkle of fresh parsley or a few drops of lemon juice to brighten the flavors, while others included leftover vegetables or bacon for added heartiness and richness. Fish chowder reflected the practicality and care of 1950s homemakers, who could transform inexpensive ingredients into a nourishing, satisfying dish that became a family favorite. Its warmth, flavor, and ability to stretch to feed multiple people made it a cherished comfort food of the era. Today, fish chowder continues to be celebrated for its simplicity and timeless appeal. Modern versions may include fresh herbs, a variety of seafood, or a richer cream base, but its essence remains the same: a hearty, flavorful, and heartwarming soup that embodies the charm, resourcefulness, and comforting traditions of 1950s American kitchens. Clam chowder, New England style. Clam chowder in 1950s. American kitchens, particularly the New England style, was a creamy, hearty soup that turned simple seafood and pantry staples into a family favorite comfort food. Fresh or canned clams provided a briny, savory base, while potatoes, onions, and a touch of milk or cream created a rich, satisfying broth that was both filling and flavorful. As it simmered, the kitchen filled with the enticing aroma of clams mingling with butter, sautéed onions, and herbs, promising warmth and nourishment with every spoonful. It was a dish that highlighted the ingenuity and resourcefulness of mid-century homemakers, transforming modest ingredients into a meal that felt both special and comforting. Preparation required patience but was straightforward. Onions were sautéed in butter to release their sweetness, then combined with diced potatoes, clam juice, and a simple broth, simmered until tender. Fresh or canned clams were added near the end to preserve their delicate texture, while milk or cream was stirred in for a smooth, velvety consistency. Seasonings such as salt, pepper, and a bay leaf enhance the flavors without overpowering the natural brininess of the clams. Some cooks thicken the chowder with a roux or flour slurry, while others left it slightly thinner for a lighter, more traditional texture. Clam chowder reflected more than just practicality. It was a testament to the care and creativity of 1950s homemakers, who could create a comforting, flavorful dish from humble ingredients. Families cherished its warmth, richness, and the sense of tradition it brought to the dinner table. Today, New England-style clam chowder remains a timeless classic. Modern adaptations may include fresh herbs, bacon, or a touch of sherry, but its essence endures: a creamy, hearty, and flavorful soup that embodies the resourcefulness, charm, and comforting culinary traditions of 1950s American kitchens. Beef and vegetable stew. Beef and vegetable stew was a cornerstone of 1950s American home cooking. offering a hearty, warming meal that could feed a family affordably and stretch over multiple days. Tender chunks of beef simmered slowly with potatoes, carrots, onions, and other seasonal vegetables, absorbing rich flavors and creating a savory, filling broth that comforted both body and soul. As it cooked, the kitchen filled with the deep, mouth-watering aroma of simmering meat and vegetables, promising a satisfying meal that was both practical and nourishing. It was a dish that perfectly exemplified the ingenuity of mid-century homemakers, turning modest ingredients into a dish that felt abundant and comforting. Preparation was simple but required time and care. Beef was browned first to develop flavor, then simmered with a combination of water or stock and vegetables until everything was tender. Seasonings like salt, pepper, thyme, and bay leaf enhanced the natural flavors, while flour or cornstarch could be added to thicken the stew slightly, giving it a rich, satisfying texture. Leftover vegetables or scraps could easily be incorporated, making it a flexible recipe that minimized waste and maximized flavor. Some cooks added a touch of tomato paste or Worcestershire sauce for added depth, while others kept it straightforward and rustic. Beef and vegetable stew reflected the resourcefulness, care, and practicality of 1950s homemakers who could create a wholesome, comforting meal from affordable ingredients. Families cherished its warmth, heartiness, and the way it brought everyone together around the dinner table. Today, beef and vegetable stew endures as a classic example of mid-century American comfort food. Modern versions may feature fresh herbs, slow-cooked techniques, or additional vegetables, but its essence remains the same: a rich, hearty, and nourishing stew that embodies the charm, practicality, and comforting flavors of 1950s kitchens. Mulligatawny soup, Americanized version. Mulligatawny soup, in its Americanized 1950s incarnation, was a comforting and slightly exotic dish that brought a touch of global flavor to mid-century American tables. Adapted from its Indian origins, the soup combined inexpensive chicken or turkey, rice, apples, and vegetables with a gentle curry or spice blend, creating a warm, flavorful broth that was both approachable and satisfying. As it simmered on the stove, the kitchen filled with an aromatic mix of spices, tender meat, and sweet tart apple, signaling a meal that was nourishing, budget-friendly, and a little adventurous. It was a dish that demonstrated the ingenuity of 1950s homemakers who could take pantry staples and transform them into something that felt special and worldly. Preparation was straightforward but benefited from careful layering of flavors. Chicken or turkey was cooked until tender, then combined with sautéed onions, carrots, celery, and diced apples. Stock or water provided the base, while curry powder, a pinch of cinnamon, and a dash of nutmeg or cloves added warmth and depth without overwhelming the family-friendly flavors. Rice was often cooked directly in the soup or served alongside to stretch the meal, and a little cream could be stirred in for richness. The result was a slightly thickened, aromatic soup that balanced savory, sweet, and mildly spicy notes in a comforting bowl. Mulligatawny soup reflected the creativity, resourcefulness, and adventurous spirit of 1950s American homemakers, showing that even simple ingredients could yield a flavorful, satisfying dish. Families enjoyed its warmth, layered flavors, and the way it brought a subtle touch of the wider world into the home kitchen. Today, mulligatawny soup remains a classic example of Americanized mid-century comfort food. Modern versions may incorporate fresh herbs, coconut milk, or more robust spices, but its essence endures. A hearty, flavorful, and slightly exotic soup that embodies the charm, practicality, and culinary creativity of 1950s kitchens. Italian wedding soup. Italian wedding soup became a beloved staple in the 1950s American kitchens, offering a comforting, hearty meal that combined tender meatballs, delicate greens, and small pasta in a flavorful broth. Despite its sophisticated name, the soup was practical and budget-friendly, allowing homemakers to stretch a small amount of meat with vegetables, broth, and noodles to feed the whole family. As it simmered, the kitchen filled with the inviting aroma of garlic, onions, and herbs mingling with the savory meatballs, promising warmth, nourishment, and a touch of elegance in an everyday meal. It was a dish that showcased the ingenuity and resourcefulness of mid-century cooks, transforming simple ingredients into a dish that felt celebratory and satisfying. Preparation was straightforward but required some gentle attention. Meatballs were made from ground beef or a mix of beef and pork, seasoned with breadcrumbs, onion, parsley, and a touch of egg, then simmered in a clear, aromatic broth. Small pasta shapes, such as acini di pepe or orzo, were added, along with chopped greens like escarole, spinach, or cabbage, which softened just enough to provide texture without losing their color. Seasonings like salt, pepper, and a pinch of nutmeg elevated the flavors, while grated Parmesan added a final touch of richness. The soup was flexible, allowing leftovers or seasonal vegetables to be incorporated, reflecting both practicality and creativity. Italian wedding soup captured the heart of 1950s home cooking, combining affordability, warmth, and family-friendly flavors. Families relished its comforting combination of savory meat, tender greens, and pasta, making it a treasured part of the weekly dinner rotation. Today, Italian wedding soup continues to be celebrated as a classic comfort food. Modern variations may include fresh herbs, chicken meatballs, or whole grain pasta, but its essence remains unchanged. A hearty, flavorful, and heartwarming soup that embodies the charm, practicality, and comforting traditions of 1950s American kitchens. Black bean soup. Black bean soup was a staple in 1950s American kitchens, offering a simple, hearty, and budget-friendly meal that stretched modest ingredients into a flavorful, satisfying dish. Dried black beans, inexpensive and protein-rich, formed the base, simmered slowly with onions, garlic, and a touch of herbs to create a rich, earthy broth that was both nourishing and comforting. As it cooked, the kitchen filled with the deep, savory aroma of beans and aromatics mingling together, promising a warm and filling meal for the whole family. This soup exemplified the ingenuity and resourcefulness of mid-century homemakers who could turn pantry staples into a dish that felt wholesome and substantial. Preparation was straightforward but benefited from slow simmering. Black beans were soaked overnight or quickly boiled to soften, then combined with sautéed onions, garlic, and occasionally bell peppers or carrots. Water or stock provided the liquid, while seasonings such as cumin, bay leaf, and black pepper enhanced the beans' natural flavor. Some cooks pureed part of the soup for a creamier texture while leaving the rest chunky, creating a balance of heartiness and smoothness. Leftover vegetables or bits of ham could be added, making the recipe flexible, economical, and practical for feeding a family. Black bean soup reflected more than frugality. It represented the care and creativity of 1950s homemakers who transformed humble ingredients into a nourishing, flavorful dish that satisfied both hunger and heart. Families appreciated its warmth, rich taste, and the way it could easily feed many mouths without stretching the grocery budget. Today, black bean soup remains a classic example of mid-century American comfort food. Modern cooks may enhance it with fresh herbs, a squeeze of lime, or a dollop of sour cream, but its essence endures. A hearty, flavorful, and resourceful soup that embodies the practicality, charm, and comforting traditions of 1950s kitchens. Potato and onion soup. Potato and onion soup was a humble yet comforting favorite in the 1950s American homes, transforming a handful of inexpensive ingredients into a warming, satisfying meal. Starchy potatoes and sweet onions were the stars, simmered together to create a naturally thick, flavorful broth that could easily feed a family without stretching the grocery budget. As the soup cooked, the kitchen filled with the rich, savory aroma of caramelizing onions mingling with the earthy scent of potatoes, promising a simple yet hearty dish that was both practical and nourishing. It was a perfect example of mid-century ingenuity, showing how resourceful homemakers could turn pantry staples into a dish that felt both filling and comforting. Preparation was straightforward. Onions were sliced or chopped and sautéed in butter until golden and fragrant, then combined with diced potatoes, water or stock, and a pinch of salt and pepper. The mixture was simmered until the potatoes were tender, and some cooks mashed part of the soup to create a creamy texture without adding cream, while others left it chunky for rustic heartiness. Leftover herbs, a sprinkle of grated cheese, or a dash of paprika could enhance the flavor, making the recipe flexible and adaptable to what was on hand. Potato and onion soup reflected the practical creativity of 1950s homemakers who could craft a meal that was simple, frugal, and satisfying. Families cherished its warmth, subtle sweetness, and the way it stretched to serve multiple mouths with minimal cost. Today, potato and onion soup endures as a classic example of mid-century comfort food. Modern versions may add fresh herbs, cream, or a touch of bacon, but its essence remains the same. A hearty, flavorful, and heartwarming soup that embodies the resourcefulness, charm, and comforting traditions of 1950s American kitchens. That wraps up our journey through 30 forgotten soups that warmed every winter in the 1950s. From creamy chowders to hearty stews, these recipes remind us of the comfort, creativity, and resourcefulness of mid-century kitchens. If these nostalgic soups sparked your appetite or your memories, be sure to like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe for more cozy dives into culinary history. Which soup would you love to bring back to your table? Let us know in the comments.